Hi there, welcome to Ceevaluations. I'm so glad you took time out of your day to be here. Today we're going to be breaking down and reviewing The Secret Lives of Baba Shegi's Wives by Lola Shoneyin. This book is the debut novel of British Nigerian poet and author Lola Shoneyin. She was born in Ibadan. She's the last born of 6 children. She earned a bachelor's degree at Ogun State University. She obtained a teaching degree from London Metropolitan University. A renowned poet, she's created poems such as Post Express in 1995, So All the Time I Was Sitting on an Egg in 1998, and Song of a Riverbird in 2002. She published this book in 2010 with her third poetry collection, For the Love of Flight, and a children's book, Mayowa and the Masquerades, in 2020. She's written for newspapers such as The Scotsman, The Guardian, The Times. She's the founder and director of the Book Buzz Foundation. She runs a publishing imprint and bookshop in Nigeria called Oida Books. She currently lives in Lagos with her husband and 4 children. Did I forget to mention? I forgot to mention something. Her husband is Ola Shoyinka, a medical doctor and the firstborn son of Wole Shoyinka. Yes, world-renowned African author, 1986 Nobel Prize for Literature winner, that Wole Shoyinka. Couple goals, am I right? Secret Lives of Baba Shegi's Wives won the Penn Oakland Josephine Miles Literary Award and the Anna Ken Saro-Wiwa Prize in 2011. It was longlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction. It was shortlisted for the NLNG Nigeria Prize for Literature in 2011 and 2012. It's been translated into several languages: French, German, Arabic, Italian, Dutch, Turkish. It's been adapted into a stage play by Rotimi Babatunde in the UK. And earlier this year, it was announced that Mo Abudu's Ebony Life Films would be adapting the novel to the big screen. So yeah. However, if all these accolades are not enough to convince you to read this book, hopefully this review will do the trick. Now, before we start, I do want to say that this is not a spoiler-free review. Trust me, if it were, it would be a lot shorter. We're going to be diving into key plot points and character arcs in every single chapter. So if you're yet to read the book and you'd like to go in blind, you can save this video for later and come back to it. I'm also going to give some trigger warnings such as polygamy, infertility, emotional and physical abuse, sexual exploitation, rape, and medical trauma. So with all that sorted and without further ado, let us get into The Secret Lives of Baba Shegi's Wives by Lola Shoneyin. This story contains 28 chapters and my breakdown will cover each of them one by one. So we first start with a family tree of the Alao family. We have Ishola Alao, aka Baba Shegi, at the top. We have his first wife, Iya Shegi. He wed her in 1984. She's the mother to daughter Shegi and son Akin. We have the second wife, Iya Tope. He married her in 1989. She's the mother to 3 girls, Tope, Afolake, and Motun, born 11 months apart. Third wife, Iya Femi, who he married in 1994. She's the mother of 2 boys, Femi and Kole. And finally, the fourth wife, the newlywed Bolanle, our main character, who he married in 1999. So the first chapter is called Belly Ache, and it starts with a 42-year-old Baba Shegi paying a visit to the character teacher. He's a bar owner in Aikara, the red light district part of Ibadan. And he's hoping to find a solution to his fourth wife's apparent childlessness. He was in a similar predicament 16 years ago with his first wife, hoping for his mother to, at the very least, see her grandchild before passing. And she did, thanks to a special herbal medicine that a teacher suggested. His first wife gave birth to his first daughter, Shegi, and he buried his mother 6 weeks later. But now he's back again. He's been married to Bolanle for like 2 years, and yet nothing. He feels embarrassed entering the bar, knowing that, the same people he boasted to 2 years ago about his bottleneck submissive conquest are now going to hear his sob story about childlessness. Some patrons tell him to drag her to a medicine man by force, but Bolanle isn't like the other 3 wives. She's young and feisty. She's from an educated background. She's not going to go to a herbalist or be reasoned with by force. So teacher suggests a rather logical, simple solution. Since the woman is educated, she will only listen to people from the world she knows. The place to take her is the hospital. So Baba Shegi goes to his workshop, belly ache from anxiety still present, and he reminisces about his first encounter with Bolanle, how she came with her friend Yemisi, one of his customers that does small business contracts at an overinflated price for the married men that she sleeps with. He was so brazen that day. He asked her to come to his shop tomorrow and the day after, and she did. She came every weekday, and eventually they fell in love with each other. despite everyone telling him he was making a mistake marrying a graduate who's probably only with him for the money. So as soon as he arrives home, he resolves to speak with Bolanle tonight. First, however, we catch a glimpse of Babashegi's relationship and family dynamic. So it's established that he's a charming man who treats all his children like a loving father should. No favoritism between offspring that breeds resentment. The wives all pretty much also have their own personalities. Shegi is the most physically affectionate towards Baba. He refers to her as the wife of his youth and the mother of the home. In contrast, Iyatope is more shy and reserved, and she's the kindest in the house to Bolanle, while Iyafemi feels smug just because she gave birth to two boys. This woman is the original boy mom. But yeah, Baba Shaggy is essentially treated like a king in his home. Beautiful wives, beautiful children, beautiful home. He's cared for, he's cooked for. Yet later that night, as he enters Bolanle's room, he reflects on why childlessness is troubling his fourth marriage. But fortunately, by the end of the chapter, Bolanle has agreed to visit the hospital tomorrow at 6 a.m. sharp. Chapter 2 is titled Polygamist, and we get a glimpse into Bolanle's psyche. For her, marrying Baba felt necessary to escape the life that she lived before seeing herself as a soiled, damaged woman. She recounts how her mother and her sister were adamant about her not marrying him. They cried, "Oh, he's a polygamist. Polygamy is for gold diggers and bush dwellers." But Bolanle's mind was already set. She's not with Baba Shegi for the monthly allowance or the lace skirts and coral beads. She's with him because, according to her, she's able to empty herself of her sorrow. He allows her to be quiet. He doesn't ask too many questions or demand too many explanations the way younger men would. This is the family she chose, and she intends to stay with them. Despite the mocking glances from the driver, Taju, as they head to the compound, despite the timidness from the children and the disdain from the other wives, even when she tries complimenting them, she still held on to hope that she could change this family for the better. But now, looking back, after 2 years and no child, Baba Shegi's affection is dwindling, and the wives have not changed in the slightest. Yatope is still cordial, and sometimes she's even kind when they're alone together. Her children, albeit timid, treat Bolanle respectfully. The attitudes of the other two wives, however, tell a very different story. Shegi and Iafemi hold a great deal of disdain for Bolanle because, she's the youngest wife, she's the educated one, the one that's perceived to be taking even more of their husband's time and affection. They smear her books with oil and rip out pages from her novels. They discourage their children from going to her for help with reading or homework. Shagi's eldest daughter, Shegi in particular, she probably fears being replaced as a dutiful big sister in her home. But her brother Akin is quite fond of Bolanle. To her for homework help, he knocks before entering her room, and he always helps all without his mother's knowledge. Thus, she clings on to the hope that one day they will all embrace her and welcome her into the Alao family. As she says, "One day I will have a child of my own, and everything will fall into its place. My husband will delight in me again the way he did before my barrenness ate away at his affection." So, chapter 3, titled Heavy Period, begins with Baba Shegi frantically searching for Bolanle. He believes Bolanle has disappeared, running away with another man, but in reality, she's already dressed, safely sleeping in the living room, waiting for the doctor's appointment. By 6 a.m. sharp, the driver, Taju, is rapping on the metal door frame, and yet Femi tells him it's good he came early, but Taju has only ever been late once, about a year ago. Why was he late, you ask? Oh, nothing, nothing. He was just busy beating his wife senseless, for letting his son suck on a coin. Now, as much as this book is a fun read, casual abuse like this against women is very prominent. That same week, a sitting male senator slapped a female colleague. And I guess the men took that as their MO and they were slapping women folk like it had become a national sport or something. Men in the markets, fabric sellers roughly tugging at women's sleeves, taxi drivers berating mothers that dared to bargain, young girls being assaulted and stripped naked are all parts of this troubling environment. Even Baba Shegi, as much as he hasn't laid a hand on Bolanle, he still has those alpha male characteristics like, oh, no one can advise me, I can speak on your behalf, I do what I want when I want, blah, blah, blah. Macho man persona throughout the book. Yeah, future Celine here. Yeah, I'm here to say that was not true, unfortunately, because in chapter 6, Baba literally tries choking Bolanle out. So, yeah. They get in the car to start the journey to University College Hospital, and Bolanle is in the middle of the pickup. Taju's arm is closing in on her left breast every time he changes gears, but eventually they pass through the gates of the hospital. And we learn, interestingly, in this chapter that Baba has quite a peculiar gut function. He's not very good at keeping food in, especially when he senses anything bad, like bad smells, bad news, anything repulsive has a very explosive effect. And whatever has gone in his mouth, it will fly back out, and whatever was in his guts would be promptly excreted from the rear end. And that's precisely what happens when they both meet the doctor. And, he's asking Bolane questions about her period. How heavy is the flow? Is it regular? Has she ever conceived before? How often do they have coitus? But what shocks Baba and ultimately breaks the camel's back is that Bolane is answering yes to being pregnant before and having it terminated somewhere that she can't recall. I think Baba couldn't take it anymore, so he rushed to the men's bathroom. And when he came back to the doctor's office, he simply states that he'll be waiting in the car for her before turning to the doctor, and he whispered, he was like, "Doctor, when you buy guavas in the marketplace, you cannot open every single one to check for rottenness. And when you find rottenness, you do not always throw away the guava. You bite around the rot and you hope that it will quench your craving." Wise words. As he leaves, the doctor reassures Bolanle that, they can come back on Monday for some more testing. But Bolanle, with a far-off look in her eye, she says she's glad that Baba Shegi heard all that was said today, and perhaps it should have been said before. So she takes the referral letter and the test request, and she bids the very confused doctor goodbye before heading to the car. Chapter 3 ends with Bolanle being dropped off at Awolowo Road Junction to visit her parents per her request, with Baba reminding her not to be late for family time. However, in Chapter 4, titled Cracks, it becomes clear that her visit to see her parents was merely an excuse. She instead makes her way to Sango Market searching for crockery, bright, colorful trinkets that would anger Baba Shegi and make him storm out of her bedroom at night. She remembers how she would try so hard at the beginning of her marriage to please Baba. She'd wake up and wash and oil her hair thoroughly. She'd rub her skin with oshun before frying snails and offering them and herself to him. But now it feels more like a chore, there's no smiling, tickling, or small talk. Every Tuesday, he just visits her room to plant his seed in her womb and then leave. A month ago, he barged into her room, yelling at her to go to a prophet to lay hands on her barren belly. She refused, obviously, stating that it was a con, and Baba exploded on her. He got in her face and he was screaming at her that, oh, does she want to remain a barren maggot forever? And mind you, Baba is a big guy. He's like 6'5", so he was really towering over her scared frame. And that same night, he comes back to her bedroom, probably aroused by her fear earlier, and in her words, hammered her like never before, emptying his testicles into her womb as deeply as possible. Bolani likens the memory to being raped, essentially. So she buys colorful crockery, admiring the old bowls and teacups with cracks here and there, before settling on an ivory bowl decorated with turquoise waves. She knows he and his wives will hate it and probably try to break it like they did with the last one when she first arrived. But this is her small act of rebellion, her get back in a sense. The chapter ends with her leaving the market, goods in hand, reminding herself to slip Akine notes about the naked wire of the electricity pole right outside their gate so he can warn his siblings to not go near it. In Chapter 5, Sharing, we step into Iatope's psyche. This chapter made me feel a lot of sympathy for Iatope because I believe much of her timidness stems from her perception of being inferior to the other wives, She's the only one that didn't give Baba a male child. She isn't educated. She refers to herself as a shit scraper, and she considers herself unattractive, even though her complexion is much better than Iafemi's mismatched patches on her knuckles and her knees. Her main concern when Bolanle first arrived at the house was that the sex rotation would be disrupted, making one wife only get one night a week with Baba. She observed Iyashegi, mother of the home, tensing up, sensing that the 15 years she had spent with Baba might be lost. Iyafemi, on the other hand, was hot and fiery. She was calling for Bolanle's blood. How dare she take her place as the newest, youngest, and freshest wife? They all had their worries about this new addition. And so they planned. They planned to wait it out, that she could never give Baba what he values most, children. They isolated her, they mocked her, and sometimes they even ignored her presence entirely, but Bolanle was steadfast. She wasn't going to accept defeat so casually. So despite the discord, she still offered to teach them how to read. even when Iafemi hissed and Iyashegi ignored her. Iyasope tried to take her up on the offer once, until Iyashegi threatened that she would destroy her useless life if she ever sat down to learn anything from Bolanle again. And so for the first few months, it stayed that way until Iyashegi reached her boiling point. She called another meeting, this time not waiting it out, but actively sabotaging Bolanle and forcing her out of the house. Yeah, Tope tried to point out that Bolane was kind to all their children, and most times she stayed in her room unless summoned anyways. But the other wives weren't listening to those defenses. Iafemi also said something very peculiar to her. She asked her why she's defending Bolane, that has she forgotten that they are bound by the same oath? What might that oath be, you ask? We'll get to that. But for right now, we see that the wives are using everything in their arsenal to create a rift between Bolanle and Baba Shegi. Small things like not letting her have her own armchair, saying that, oh, she can have one when she's earned it by birthing a child, isolating her from her friends like Yemisi. And yet, despite all this, Bolanle endures, still respectful, still kind to the kids and to Iyatope. So when Iyashegi called another meeting on the morning of the hospital visits, Iyatope said she wanted no part of their sabotage plans anymore. That earned aggrieved glances from her co-wives. Iyashegi rained curses on her, telling her to keep her stupid mouth shut, again bringing up the oath and how they're all bound together. The chapter ends with a defeated Iyatope leaving the room, wishing that she wasn't such a coward so that she could warn Bolanle about her impending doom. But alas, the fear of her co-wife stopped her. She will just keep quiet and watch as she's always done. I mean, what else can a shit scraper do? In chapter 6, Rat Head, we see the plan that the wives conspired put into action. So when Bolanle arrives at home, she sees a small crowd of older women gathered in front of her house. So the wives are delirious and screaming, minus Iyatope. She has an arm wrapped around Shegi, but Shegi stares at Bolanle with red-rimmed eyes. The crowd parts, letting her through the veranda and into the sitting room where Baba Shegi is seated on his armchair. He asks her where she's been. Bolani answers that, oh, it's not even 6, she's back on time like she promised. But Baba is asking her where she's been, not that she's late. And she replies, oh, so I can't even leave the house now. And that triggers his aggression and he lunges at her with the force of a gorilla and constricts her windpipe. She pleads with him that she only went to the market to buy a bowl and he lets her go, her body falling limp as Iyatope tries to help her up. She's telling Bolanle to just confess if she did it, but Bolanle doesn't even know what anyone is talking about until Baba Shegi produces a polythene bag with a decomposed bush rat head tied with a red thread and a 4-inch nail right in its head and out its throat. I mean, come on. Ritual murder. You're going to accuse a 25-year-old university graduate of ritual murder just because she hasn't had a child with her husband of 2 years. It's a foolish plan. It's a foolish plan. Incredibly foolish plan that Bolanle easily defends against. And even Baba Shegi eventually recognizes its absurdity and he just orders her to return to her room. And the mini spectacle concludes and all the onlookers leave. Later, Baba visits teacher again and he does seem remorseful about the way he acted, but he's more confused about why Bolanle's reaction showed no fear, just pain, not even attempting to fight back. He tells teacher he thinks his own recent hostility towards Bolanle probably made the other wives notice and copy him. Regardless, accusing someone of practicing juju is crazy, but the chapter ends with teacher giving Baba some words of wisdom. Women do not hesitate to become cannibals when they are hungry. The solution lies with you. Treat your wives equally. Blacken the kettle as you blacken the pot. In chapter 7, Queen, we step into Iyafemi's psyche. Now, just a refresher, Iyafemi is the third wife with 2 boys. Yeah, she's the boy mom. And she is so cartoonishly evil. It's actually laughable if you don't know the lengths that she's willing to go to thread on her enemies. She despises the other wives. She calls Iyashegi a fat pig. She calls Iyatope useless. And she hated Bolale from the start, claiming that her dark skin wasn't beauty and real beauty is found in pale yellow skin. I think she means pale patchy skin, from all the bleach. She recounts how one time when Bolanle first arrived at the house, Baba Shegi tasked her with sewing ashwebi for the entire household for a neighbor's birthday party. She gave the tailor enough fabric to make clothes for everyone in the house. Everyone except Bolanle. Hers was homemade. Very ugly. To be fair, all the other wives weren't faring any better in their clothes, but Bolanle's was the worst looking one. But back to the present. After the failed rat head incident, her and Iyashegi decide to devise a new plan, just the two of them without Iyatope, to restore their home to what it was. So in chapter 8, Trade, is where we get to know more about our mother of the house, Iyashegi. Big Madam, first wife. What she says goes, and all the other wives need to know their place. She tells them what to do, when to eat, sleep, and work. She's a very cunning woman. We learned that after birthing her second child, a son for that matter, she emotionally manipulated Baba Shegi into opening shops for her in not one, not two, not even three, but four major markets in their town. She also convinced him to let her take driving lessons, saying that, oh, so she can take her kids to school herself. He agreed to it all to keep peace in his home and keep Iyashegi satisfied. As she says, men are like yam. You cut them how you like. So she's basically an independent woman cosplaying as a housewife. Like I said, very cunning woman. Chapter 9, titled Iyatope, takes us back to our second wife's POV, and we learn more about her life before she married Baba Shegi. 9 years ago, she was a 23-year-old woman whose father came from a long line of cassava farmers who sold their harvest to rich men in the city. In her village, children weren't encouraged to go to school. The nearest school was like 6 miles down the road, and they'd much rather make the children tend to cassava stalls. Yatope always hated planting season, and she would groan and complain of backache every time, but she loved weeding. She loved the feel of small leaves and stems, laying them in a row and pretending to hug them to her imaginary friends. She still considers herself to be a child at heart, but that didn't stop her father from offering her as compensation to one of his clients, Baba Shegi, who was upset with the underwhelming harvest. He claimed that she is not a great beauty, but she is as strong as 3 donkeys. Gee, thanks, Dad. Funny side notes, when Iyatobe's dad told Baba Shegi about the failed harvest, the first thing he did was grab a random boy and tell him to take him to the nearest bathroom. But yeah, quite unceremoniously, she marries Baba, she arrives at the house, and immediately starts getting ordered by Iyashegi. A few months after her arrival, Iyashegi knocks on her door with one stern sentence of advice: get pregnant quickly, or he will start to force feed you bitter concoctions from medicine men until your belly rumbles in your sleep. Now, nothing is explicitly said about the how of getting pregnant, but it is implied that it's going to have to be done by someone other than Baba Shegi. So she does. She goes to a meat seller that Shegi sent her to every Wednesday. She would go to the man's shop and do until eventually she gave birth to her first daughter, Tope. But oh no, she doesn't stop there. No, she was too stigmatized at that point. And for 4 good years, she kept up the ruse. 3 days of pummeling from Baba Shegi and then 1 day of healing from her meat seller. It got to a point that after her third daughter, Shegi had to ban her from seeing the man again, informing her that a new wife was coming, but she also feared that Baba Shegi might see through the ruse eventually if she kept this up. So she stopped, deciding to be a good mother and to dedicate her life to her 3 daughters. Even when the third wife, Iyafemi, gave birth to her son, and Baba Shegi spoke of him like the boy were a jewel. You know, she swallows the lump in her throat and she teaches her daughter all that she knows. Don't commit adultery. Follow the path that is good and right. She hopes to help Bolanle at least talk to her one day, but for now, she keeps her mouth shut and her secrets inside. And even though Baba doesn't like it, she weeds when he lies with her, closing her eyes and imagining herself scraping the soil, pushing the leaves and prodding the stems until the plant is uprooted and pushing at her fingertips. In chapter 10, Rogue, Baba apologizes for yesterday's outburst with a brown envelope filled with 50 naira notes slid under Bolanle's door. So she decides to use the money to visit the crockery store during lunchtime again. But then when she gets there, she finds the stall completely empty because apparently yesterday a rich man came to buy some plates and he found his stolen plates on sale. The man immediately called the police and the crockery seller confessed within 3 minutes, even before the third slap landed on the guy's face. She rushes home to get rid of all the bowls that she bought yesterday. But there's a scene in this chapter about Bolanle, her mom, and her little sister, Omolara. It seems like her mom raised them very heavy-handedly. You know, she wanted to bring up children that were able-bodied women who fight for their prosperity and win. So it begs the question then, why would she marry Baba Shegi and stay in a complicit marriage? What exactly happened to our main character to choose this known bleakness over the unknown? When she gets home, she not only burns the crushed bowls, but also all the mementos that she's kept over 2 years of being in this house. She buries the ashes in warm soil, stating that now there would be room for a nice cot. We go back to Iyashegi in chapter 11, where we learn more interesting facts about her. Like, number one, her name is actually Labake. Number two, she was an enormous child. Number three, she never really knew her father. He ran away and he left her mom for a more beautiful lady. And number four, she was actually betrothed to Baba Shegi because his mom and her mom were friends. And so they thought, hey, one of us has a daughter, one of us has a son. I want grandchildren, you want grandchildren. Let's come to some sort of arrangement, you know. But yeah, Shaggy didn't want to get married. I mean, how could she when all she heard her mother talk about growing up was, oh, how men are nothing, they're fools, and the penis between their legs is all they are useful for. And only a foolish woman would lean on a man's promises. Oh, also number five, did I forget to mention, she loves money. She loves money. Yeah, Shaggy worships money. Money is her husband. So when her mother gets tired of her constant refusal for marriage, you know what this woman does? She takes all the money that Shaggy saved and she gives it to Baba Shaggy as a wedding gift. And they throw the most lavish wedding that their village has ever seen. So per her mother's request, she follows her money. She follows Baba Shaggy even when he can't resist and he brings home other wives. She stays because at the end of the day, she's the one keeping this household together. She's the one that approves either vengeance or calm. Her two children bound by loyalty on her right, and the other two wives bound by fear on her left. Her money will continue to grow, her wealth will continue to expand, and one day Baba Shegi will breathe his last breath and she will be free. Her money will return to her and she will leave this city, return to her village, and build a new house in her mother's name. That is her destined future, and she's not going to let Bolanle ruin her plans. Chapter 12, to put it mildly, is quite sad. It's called Theatre, and it starts with Bolanle visiting the St. Gabriel's Ultrasound Center to get her test done. And it goes smoothly. You know, the ultrasound was mildly uncomfortable, but it was manageable. However, when the examination is done, she thinks back to a memory from 10 years ago, back when she was still alive. Back then, she held the position of head girl at her school, and she led the school's literary and debating society. She was her mother's most beloved child until one faithful day. The rain was so heavy, it soaked completely through her clothes as she stood by the roadside, trying and failing to get any taxis to stop. But one car stops though. A polished Mercedes with a handsome man driving. Nice cologne, filed fingernails, respectable, or so she thought. Now she knows she wasn't supposed to go anywhere with strangers. I mean, obviously her mother warned her. But the nice man was offering to take her to Oshutokun Junction to get a taxi. And so she enters. He locks the door behind her. He doesn't go to the junction. Instead, he goes straight to his house, luring Bolanle into his compound, then into his front door, then his living room, all the while locking all the doors behind him. She's in the sitting room trying to turn on the large flat screen TV when the man, Thomas, which is what he said his name was, comes out of the bedroom shirtless and in just his boxers. She covers her eyes and pleads with him that all she wants is to go home, but his fist connects with her cheekbones and then her shoulders before he drags her by her hair to the bedroom. Throws her on the bed, trying to force her legs apart, but she resists. He takes one of the pillows, intending to suffocate her, telling her that if she doesn't want to die, she will spread her legs or else. Her last thought before blacking out was this the same man who had helped her out of the rain? Like, where did this monster come from? She comes to some time later with him splashing icy water on her face, the soreness between her legs making her weep. He is obviously unremorseful and he tells her to clean herself up before driving her to her streets, not forgetting to tell her that she should be happy, that she's a woman now, and that she should be thankful. She sputters out a weak thank you and leaps out of the car, not sparing him one more glance, not wanting to remember his face. To make matters worse, she got pregnant, and the sight of the blood and the syringes in the lab brings back memories of the dingy abortion clinic that her landlord's son, Shegun, brought her to. Now, her and Chegun were sleeping together at the time, and I guess he was worried that the child could be his. The memory of that day, plus the hot sun that warms the top of her head as she leaves the clinic, is what finally causes the tears to fall. Now, in chapter 13, we go back to Iyafemi, aka Boy Mom, and we learn more about her backstory. After reading this chapter, I still think she's evil. However, she truly has her reasons. Like, the poor woman has been through a lot. So, first, we found out that she was the only child born into a Muslim home. But once both her parents died, her uncle and her wicked step aunt inherited all of her father's land and belongings and sold her off to the Adebe family as a house girl for 15 years. Mind you, her parents died when she was, what, 8? Because she's like, what, 23 when she marries Baba Shegi. So it's deplorable. For 15 years, she's been sent packing from her family home. She's not allowed to pursue an education, and she's forced to serve a woman who she calls grandma and her family. It's a hopeless situation until one day she's in the market. She's running a last minute errand for grandma on the verge of collapse when a random man comes up to her and asks her if she knows Jesus. She tells him no, that she was born a Muslim, but the man buys her a Coke and claims that all sinners will burn in hell and she needs to repent so as to avoid that fate. Now, I'm sure the man was trying to instill the fear of God in her, but all his claims about sinners, including those people like grandma and her family burning in hell, actually excited her. So bada bing, bada boom, she says the sinner's prayer, the man declares her born again. And from that day on, she prayed every single morning and every single night that for every slap, every beating, every insult, grandma and her family would burn in hell. Well, all of her family except Tunde. Tunde was grandma's first son and Iafemi's boy toy at the time. You know, he'd come slip between her legs late at night under the staircase and leave money between the folds of her mat. After 2 months of prayer, grandma slipped in the bathtub and broke her leg. But that just resulted in more work for Iafemi since grandma was now immobile. Instead, Iafemi started putting drops of urine and toilet water in her teacup. And soon enough, grandma got admitted to the hospital. And it was during these days when the house was empty and she could wander beyond the fence that she met Baba Shegi on a construction site down the road. She offered him some water. The next day, he got Taju to deliver her a basket of oranges. She bribed Taju to put in a good word for her to Baba, and like a week later, she packed all her belongings. She stole complete sets of jewelry, rubbed sheets in every single pillow in the house except Tunde's, and she drove off in Baba's pickup. She wasn't exactly impressed by Baba or his wives. You know, she calls Iyashegi aging toad and Iyatope shameless goats, but she has her own room and her own bed, things that she's never had before. And so for that, she'll play the part of a good wife. She'll listen when the frog, Iyashegi, gives her tips and tricks to gain Baba's affection, and even telling her the way children are born in the Alao household. Now, I'm sure by now most of you must have guessed this, but don't worry, all will be revealed soon. Plus, the information works perfectly with the plan that she already had in her head. Plans with Tunde, whom she reconnects with eventually after marrying Baba. And 6 months later, Femi is brought home, solidifying her place in the household. But in all the years she's lived in Baba Shegi's house, she's never forgotten the evil that her uncle did to her. And her hunger for revenge grows more and more every day. Until one day, last week, she returned to her village. Tunde drove her to her old compound and she surveys as she hides in the goat barn and she waits. She waits for the children to go to school and for her uncle to go to her father's farmland. And then she calmly walks up to the door and knocks. And when her aunt opens, she simply asks, "Do you know the Bible says, 'Touch not my anointed'?" Before she barges in and she douses the whole house in paraffin and sets it ablaze with the auntie inside. No, I'm kidding, I'm kidding. The auntie wasn't inside. She let her out. She's not that evil. Well, not yet, at least. So her main goal now is to continue being Baba Shegi's favorite wife. You know, she'll buy time until he crooks so that her and Tunde can be together and she can shove her handsome, educated sons in grandma's stupid face. But now, Bolanle being in the picture could rupture those plans. So her and Iyashegi make another plan. This time, they get a medicine man recommended by Mr. Taju in order to poison Bolanle. And so the chapter ends with Iyashegi leaving the plastic-bound powder in the kitchen, with Iyafemi declaring, "The Lord is going to use me to conquer my enemy. The mantle of justice has fallen on me. I am blessed." Ha! In chapter 14, Homeward, Bolanle actually decides to visit her home this time after the rat head incident. She goes back to her landlord's compound, knocking on the door of one of the two-bedroom bungalows, thinking how she could be visiting her friends instead, if not for embarrassment. She hasn't been able to bring herself to apologize to her friends since Baba Shegi sent them away for visiting too much. He called them harlots and bad influences for a young wife. But she knew she had to visit home, if only to tell her mother about the rumors spreading within her married life. Neither her mother nor her sister ever visited her and Baba's. As she knocks, a voice tells her to come in, and it's her mother. Bolanle drops her bag and the present meant for Cole's birthday as she sees half of her mother's face drooped, her left eye teary and nostrils running with spit dribbling down her chin. Her mother tells her the doctors say it's Bell's palsy or a mild stroke, but that does nothing to calm Bolanle's angst. Now, Bolanle's relationship with her mother is quite complicated. We see on one hand that her mother tried nurturing and teaching her daughters good morals when they were children, but most of the memories of her childhood are of her mom yelling at her for failing 1 out of 6 exams, or the beatings that she would give her little sister Lara, the two of them praying most times for their father to come home early from his drinking and save them from her wrath, but most times he wasn't much help either. Polanyi tries to be civil with her mom, but soon what was supposed to be a discussion turns into a screaming match, her mother hurling insults at her. Ruined, damaged, useless, she aims these words at Bolanle and hits her right where it hurts. So hard that she blurts out the secret that she's been keeping for a decade, that she was raped at 15, but she wanted to remain her mother's perfect daughter, so she kept it a secret. Her mother didn't believe her at first, very African of her. But slowly, as Bolanle explains everything, well, almost everything, she doesn't tell her about Shegun or the abortion. Tears running down her cheeks, her mom softens, tears escaping her own eyes as she questions how she was so blind all these years. Bolanle explains that was why she had to become a shell of herself and why she married Baba Shegi, because she felt lost and she didn't want to do anything with her life. And all Baba wanted from her was to be his wife, so it was the perfect contract. After the revelation, her mother becomes somewhat more sympathetic, even though the words "I told you so" were like etched on her face. Before Bolanle leaves, she soaks the dirty laundry, she makes Eba eat some of the okra soup that her mom made, and awkwardly gives her mom a firm one-hand embrace, tenderness that she isn't exactly used to. As she's walking back home that evening, she passes a palm wine shed and she doesn't really pay much attention to it until Shegi comes running behind her, pleading with her that please, she shouldn't tell her mom or her dad that she saw her with a boy. Bolane doesn't care. Hell, she didn't even see the boy, but she indulges Shegi. She asks her about the boy, where they met, if she feels comfortable and happy with him. They talk like that, strolling hand in hand until they reach the house and they get to Bolanle's room and they see a cream-colored bowl sitting on the dressing table, a bowl of pepper chicken made for Kole's birthday. Yafemi was so kind to leave a poisonous batch just for Bolanle. But Bolanle isn't hungry. She ate at her parents' house, remember? So who eats the poisoned chicken? Shegi, who Bolanle unknowingly dooms to a fate meant for herself. Shegi scarfs down all the chicken and she runs out of the room to answer her mother's call, but not before Bolanle tells her to thank Iyafemi for the food and to give Kole his birthday presents before going straight to bed. Bolanle is awoken in chapter 15, Night Noises, by the sound of harmonizing crickets in her room, spraying insecticide and changing into her nightgown. She hears voices filtering through the walls. It's Shegi and her mother, and it sounds like she's being scolded or something. Shegi snaps at her daughter to get out of the room, and Bolanle hears shuffling sounds before going back to bed. Around 2 a.m., she's awoken again, this time by a scream. Not a high-pitched scream, but a low, sorrowful, lengthy one of pain and mourning. She jolts out of the bed and she runs to the sitting room to find a commotion. Baba Shegi is on his knees over Shegi's body. She's convulsing and foaming at the mouth. He's pleading, praying, promising her anything and everything to make her stop. His tears creating dark patches on her nightgown. Tope, whose entire front is covered in blood and undigested chicken chunks, rushes to get Baba's shirts and car keys. Shagi was to the side, her face half covered by the scarf draped over her face. Femi was just annoyed that she and her kids were woken up from their slumber. Tope and Akin carry Shagi to the car. Bolanle seeing her deflated face as they passed, pale palms and crooked fingers. She vomited and convulsed so hard that she soiled herself before being placed in the car, with Baba Shegi and Iyatope rushing her to the hospital. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Iyashegi grabs Bolanle painfully by her shoulders, digging her nails into her skin, asking her, what did she do to her daughter? What cause did she put on her daughter? Bolanle is rightly confused and tries to push her off. Meanwhile, Iyafemi just lounges on the armchair, head in hand, staring at the commotion. Iyashegi pushes Bolanle to the floor, her head hitting the cold tiles, the back of her head now moist with blood. And she asks what all the hostility is for. Like, what has she ever done to make them hate her so? 1 minute, they are giving her birthday chicken. The next minute, they are calling her a witch and an evil spirit. Iyafemi mocks her, telling her that soon all her evil will be revealed, which is when Bolanle confesses that she's glad she didn't eat the chicken and instead gave it to Shegi. She's glad that her lips didn't touch food made from hands that hated her. She runs to her room, locking the door behind her. Meanwhile, Shegi and Iyafemi are in shock at her revelation. They look at each other. Shegi asking Iyafemi if she used all the powder. Every grain of it, she replies. The next morning, Iyafemi reluctantly makes breakfast for all the kids, Bolanle soothing her aching skull and shoulders before leaving her room. Baba Shegi and Iyatope soon arrive at the compound and the children run to the door. They are exhausted, with Iyatope tearing off the vomit-covered dress and Baba Shegi announcing the doctor's diagnosis of food poisoning before collapsing onto his armchair and snoring loudly. The rest of the week was spent anxiously waiting and hoping for Shegi's recovery. The children missed her. Akin falls into a pit of loneliness without his sister around. He has no one to go to for comfort. His mother was not being herself. Iyatope was too busy trying to run the household, and Iyafemi only cares for her own children. The only person he wished to comfort him was his sister, and she wasn't there. He would go at times to Bolanle's door, knocking on it quietly, but fleeing before she even had a chance to open it. Okay, that was a lot of depression in a short amount of time, which is why I'm glad that chapter 16 notes reduces the tension a bit, and honestly, it made me cackle because I love hating on Iyafemi's character. So in this chapter, Iyafemi states that God has turned his face from this house. Why? Well, first, because Shegi isn't getting better. I mean, the girl's hair is falling out. It falls out if you so much as brush against it. But that's not what grieves her. She doesn't care about any of the other children except her own. No, no, no. It's the notes that Haju brings back from Tunde's office. This is the notes. Let me read it. Following my mom's passing, I have decided to accept the position of US rep. A big thank you to those of you who made it to my mom's funeral at such short notice. For those of you that didn't get the chance to say goodbye, forgive me. My email address remains the same, so I look forward to hearing from you soon. Ever yours, Tunde Adebe. Not only did her nemesis die, therefore ruining her plans of gloating in her face with her grandchildren, but Tunde basically just abandoned her and moved to the US. The woman doesn't even know what an email or a US rep is. All she knows now is that her plans are ruined, and for the first time in a long time, she realizes that she is truly an orphan, truly alone. No one to talk to, no one to walk with. She ends the chapter praying for God to cover her so her enemies don't laugh at her shame and to not let the devil smite her in these trying times. In chapter 17, results, Bolanle goes to the doctor's office for the results from her earlier tests. The doctor examines her once more and tells her that despite the abortion procedure done by an unqualified nurse, she seemingly escaped unscathed, and there should be no reason for her not to be able to bear children. Unless... So the doctor tells her to bring her husband back on Monday for some preliminary testing. Bolanle isn't sure how she's going to convince Baba, but she agrees to the 10:30 appointment that the doctor sets. They also clean and dress her head wound before giving her an anti-tetanus injection and seeing her off. She decides to go back to her house for another family visit and instead walks into a screaming match between her mom and her little sister, Lola. Her dad, ever the meek, emasculated man, sits on the side, his head in his hands. Apparently, Lola is pregnant by, by a Jamaican musician with knotted hair and ripped jeans who always reeks of cigarettes. The Akambi women sure know how to pick 'em, huh? Anyways, her mother isn't having it, but Bolanle tries to reason with her that if she does turn out to be barren, then that means the child that Lola is carrying is her only hope of seeing her grandchildren before death. So that quote of reason silences the shouting. Her mom and Lara embrace one another, and Lola mouths a thank you to Bolanle. Soon enough, they're all laughing and conversing like a normal happy family, and Bolanle decides not to dampen the mood by bringing up, her hospital visits or Shegi's illness. As she leaves the house, she spots Shegun and his mother, the landlady, her skin glistening ripe like cut pawpaw. She greets her, and the woman asks Bolanle what she's currently up to. Bolanle tells her that she's looking for a job and hopefully starting a master's soon, earning a shocked expression from Shegun and a cynical laugh from his mother. Bolanle is hot with embarrassment, and she thinks to herself, well, you weren't laughing the night armed robbers stormed into your house and made you do frog jumps now. Yes, that actually happened. That actually happened. One night when Bolanle was younger and she and Shegun were still doing activities together, she sneaked into his room through the back door for a night of escapades. Before you know it, gunshot sounds forced them to hide in the ceiling of his bathroom. They watched, holding their breaths, as the robbers dragged his beaten and bloodied father through the house, looking for the safe filled with valuables. Shegun wept beside her as they watched his mother being forced to frog jump at machete points. Bolanle reached a hand out to him at the time, but he paid her no mind. He was just embarrassed that a lowly tenant was witnessing such a personal family tragedy. His mother cried, shaken and bruised, and the thieves finally left at 4 a.m. with thousands of dollars and other trinkets. As soon as they were gone, Shegun dislodged the tiles and jumped down, running to his mother, while Bolanle quietly crept back home. The next day, all the tenants gathered to give their condolences, Bolanle realizing that the robbers killed Shegun's father that night. She didn't see Shegun until a few days after the funeral, catching a glimpse of him, but he turned away once he spotted her. Not a single sign of acknowledgement from the boy, who was just using her teenage naivety to add another post to his bed frame. In chapter 18, Seed, Bolanle somehow convinces Baba Shegi to follow the doctor's orders for tests. So Taju takes them to University Clinic Hospital, where they meet Dr. Dibia again. The nurses take Baba Shegi to a private room to perform the necessary procedures for conducting a sperm count. Baba, ever the traditionalist, doesn't understand how he's supposed to get aroused without a woman physically present. But the nurse talks him through how to use the Vaseline available and his imagination. And soon enough, he erupts right on the wall, but scrapes most of it into the container before going back to the waiting room to meet Bolanle. And finally, it is revealed that Baba Shegi's sperm counts 0. Baba Shegi's big hefty balls, there's nothing inside. Of course, this isn't revealed to Baba and Bolanle because the earlier head wound, they are scared that, Baba might become violent if he receives the news. Honestly, at this point here, my issue is, okay, the man has 7 kids already. We know that the 3 girls from Iyatope were fathered by the meat seller. Iyafemi's 2 boys were fathered by Tunde. That just leaves Shegi. The woman who started all of this, who did this woman sleep with to get Shegi and Akin? Who is their biological father? The doctors instead decide to tell Baba Shegi that the tests were inconclusive and he needs to bring one more of his wives for the last round of testing on Monday. A wife that he can trust. So eventually, Baba relents and tells them that he will be bringing Mrs. Labake Alao, aka Iya Shegi. Finally, in chapter 19, Baba Shegi, we step into Baba Shegi's POV for a bit to see some of his early childhood days. So his father was a farmer who died in the forest, falling into a pit at barely 20 years old. Now, because of this incident, no man in their village dared to remarry his mother for fear of them meeting the same fate. But she didn't mind, instead focusing all her attention on raising Baba as best as she could. At 17, Baba fell gravely ill. He lost the ability to walk, to talk, and his throat swelled up to twice its size, felt like it was on fire. The medicine man at the time said it was his father's vengeful spirits coming to take his soul, but the doctors at UCH diagnosed that it was probably just a case of childhood mumps, which I guess inadvertently caused his impotency actually. The medicine man told his mother that as soon as he was of age, she should send him away from the forest and hunting altogether. So a few weeks after the fever broke and the neck swelling went down, she tied a wad of cash in a handkerchief, put it in his pocket, and sent him off to Ibadan to work as an apprentice plumber. He worked there for many years until he eventually met Teacher. Now, Baba Shegi considers Teacher a mentor, someone who brought solutions to every problem that Baba came to him with. It was teacher that told him to return home and marry the woman that his mother found for him. It was teacher who pointed in the direction of the medicine man whose herbs got Iyashegi pregnant. Yet, in as much as teacher warned him about his lust for women, Baba simply could not resist. He married a second wife as a peace offering and a third wife for her humility towards him. But Bolanle, he just wanted Bolanle. He just wanted her, like a thirsty child wants water. He set his mind to her and he intends to keep her, something that his also wise teacher approves of. Chapter 20, Homecoming, starts with Iyashegi proclaiming that there is something special about a mother bathing her child. Therefore, she will bathe her returning daughter, Shegi. How is Shaggy doing, by the way? Well, she's not good. She's not good. The whites of her eyes have turned yellow. Her scalp is devoid of any hair, and her once plump shape has been flattened into herself. At her return, Baba declares there must be a celebration. And it's actually very heartwarming, the speech that he gives upon his daughter's arrival and recovery. It's clear that Baba cherishes his children, especially his eldest, which pleases Iyashegi. However, we as the readers, we know that this child is not his biological offspring. We don't know whose yet, but it's not his. And that makes the events which happen in later chapters truly heartbreaking. But for now, as the children skip around the room with glee, Yashagi scans the scene in front of her. Shegi and Bolanle are in the sitting room. Shegi is clutching Bolanle's hand close to her chest, and then she asks her father if she can sleep in Bolanle's room tonight. All eyes in the room turn to Iyashegi, but Baba grants the request, pulling Iyashegi aside to tell her that her child will always be her child and she will always be her mother. At bath time, Shegi is quiet as her mother bathes her, accusing eyes staring straight at her. Iyashegi thinks it's because of her illness, and she tells her there's no shame in sickness. This prompts Shegi to ask, is there shame in death? Shegi chastises her for speaking that way, but Shegi reveals the doctor said she was poisoned. She questions her mother why there would be poison in the house, and she says that she knows it was from the food she ate the night she went to Bolanle's room. Shegi's outburst provokes her mother, telling her to just let her die, until Shegi seemingly runs mad and finally confesses that the food wasn't meant for her. Chapter 21, Washing Day, is a continuation of events from the last chapter, but in Iyatope's POV, after Shegi's return to the house. She sees the dynamic between the children, how they don't talk together or play together like they used to. But she feels proud of Akin, though, who's been stepping up and caring for his siblings. She thinks he's going to grow up to be a great father one day, caring but firm. Even when Iyafemi's stubborn sons cause havoc, he's there to subdue it. She's called to a meeting with Iyashegi and Iyafemi after the bath, and Iyashegi tells them about her confession. Now, at this point, they all know they are pretty much screwed if Shegi tells either her father or Bolanle. Iyafemi is livid, she's accusing Iyashegi of being weak for divulging such secrets. But Iyatope is weirdly at peace, stating that their time in the house is finished and they deserve to be thrown into the streets for what they've done. Iyafemi tries taunting her, saying that she'll go to prison. But that's when our girl finally, for the first time, stands up for herself. And she tells Iyafemi that no, she's the one who's going to prison for cooking her enemy's last meal and not even caring about Shegi's health, calling her unworthy of the child that she soiled, loud enough for Iyashegi to hear. Chapter 22, Victor, is a short but poignant one. Bolanle is Shegi's main caretaker in the house, and from the looks of it, Shegi isn't getting any better. In fact, it's as if the girl is rotting from the inside. Like, she's not putting on any weight, and there's a relentless stream of blood that just trickles from her nose. Her breath is foul, even when she exhales from her nostrils. Sometimes she babbles incoherently, and sometimes she doesn't even speak at all. The illness is ravaging her body and her mind. She says the oddest thing sometimes, calling Bolanle a victor, something no one's ever called her. Tries questioning Shegi, but the girl drifts in and out of consciousness most times, so Bolanle just stays by her side, hoping that her presence can strengthen Shegi's resolve. Chapter 23 is aptly titled Outs, because Shegi quite frankly just outs the secrets. As soon as she and Baba get to the hospital and enter the doctor's office, she drops to her knees in front of Baba, in front of the doctors, and she confesses that as a young wife, childless and restless, she got a sinful idea that if her husband had no seed, what harm could it do to seek it elsewhere? So she found seed elsewhere and she planted it in her belly. Baba Shegi is not the biological father of his first child, nor his second child. Hell, she rips the band-aid clean off and tells him that she advised the other wives to do the same, and so none of their children are his either. Once she's done with her revelation, she calmly picks herself up and leaves the room, no longer feeling like hundreds of ants are crawling on her skin. The secret was finally out, and now she can find peace. Baba, on the other hand, just sits silently, weeping in his chair as the doctors tiptoe out of the room, carrying all the sharp objects with them, just in case, obviously. This brings us to the last 5 chapters of the book. Quite frankly, I do think the last 5 chapters do feel a bit rushed. However, the author is still able to tie the story together in a nice bow by the last page. So, chapter 24 is titled Taju, aka Mr. Taju, the driver, the only other adult in this household whose POV we're yet to see. Now, so far, Taju has been a prominent background character in the story, but we never seem to know what the guy is thinking until now. Taju is a simple man, starting his chapter by acknowledging that the rich have fat bellies. He doesn't like stress and he doesn't like being in the spotlight, instead deciding to follow in his elder brother's footsteps, becoming a driver against his mother's wishes. His elder brother, Faruku, was a bus driver, but he was also a chronic womanizer and a drunk who killed a bus full of passengers that he was driving after a heavy night of drinking, before essentially being burnt alive by the community for such a sin. His mother always said that the bus drove him to his death. But Taju saw his brother's life. You know, he saw the way women flocked to him and his yellow skin when he was alive, peeking through the keyhole of their bedroom when his brother had female visitors around. But he also saw those same women turn their affection to other men after his passing. Such fickle creatures, he thinks. Not long after he started working for Baba Shegi, Baba confided in Taju about his wife's childlessness. Now remember how Baba Shegi thought it was the herbs that teacher recommended that helped Sia Shegi get pregnant? No, no. It was Taju. It was Taju. Because as Baba was confiding in him, Madam was climbing and riding him until she became Iya Shegi. 2 years later, she did the same thing to get Akin. Taju swears that he can see his youngest son growing up to resemble him. Mind you, Taju was also collecting money from Tunde every time Iyafemi sent him to relay a message. So I'm sure the guy was so sad. But yes, it is revealed that Taju is the biological father of Shegi and Akin. He pities his boss. I mean, it must suck to have been deceived for so long, especially by someone you employed. But hey, the poor man thinks he acted as honorably as anyone could if they were in his shoes. Again, he's just a simple man with a simple life, and he would like to keep it that way, which is why in chapter 25, Farewell, when he finds out that Shegi outed their secrets, the first thing he asks is if she mentioned his name. Because he's still an employee. God forbid his oga finds out that he got cooked. He'll have no money to support his family. Anyways, Shegi just trudges home and Taju has to drive Baba to teacher shack. What's so funny in this chapter is in order for Taju to escape, he tells Baba that, oh, he's going for his mother's funeral. But Baba remember giving money for Taju's mother's funeral 2 years ago. But the man already has too much in his head, you know. He doesn't even question it. He just gives Taju the money, takes the keys, and Taju marches across the road, never to be seen again. Teacher, on the other hand, I feel exposes his slimeliness. Like, yes, after hearing Baba's story, he tells him to send the deceivers back to their father's house. But he only does that because no wives equals Baba frequenting his shack even more often, therefore spending even more money. I just can't see him as this noble man that Baba sees him as. It's just something about the man, like he's the one that introduced a young Baba to Ayakari, you know, he's the one that gave him advice on basically all of his big life decisions. It just feels very predatory in my opinion. He does manage to convince Baba that eventually the children will seek their true fathers. And Baba nods at teacher's seemingly infinite wisdom. Mission accomplished, teacher thinks. And so in chapter 26, Silence, the silence in the Alao house grows as all the wives plus Shegi waits for the sound of Baba's pickup. Now, Bonali didn't really understand why the wives and Shegi had this air of dread around them, but she would come to find out as Baba's heavy footsteps entered the compound just before 11 p.m. He stumbles in, proclaiming that the witches have gathered for blood, ripping off his soiled shirts. Shegi tries to calm him down, but she receives a resounding slap on her jaw, which, shuts her up really quick. Femi tries her usual, oh, it was the work of the devil spiel. But Baba says if it is the devil, all of them plus the devil will leave his house tonight. It's only when Bolanle asks what all this is about does he soften and informs her that yes, these women are all witches who have deceived him for 15 plus years, bringing bastards into his home, claiming that they are his children. It's not funny, I promise, but as he's speaking, he's coughing. And then he coughs off phlegm and it lands on Iafemi's forehead. And she dare not wipe that phlegm off her forehead. Then he slaps Iatope's headscarf off of her head, calling her a harlot. And then he stumbles onto his armchair and he just falls asleep. But later events aren't funny because after Baba falls asleep, Shegi begins having multiple seizures. The wives desperately trying to stop it, but their efforts are futile because soon Shegi's eyes roll, her body goes rigid before ultimately slumping down, lifeless. Shegi dies from complications relating to the poison meant for another in her mother's arms as all the women weep. It's very sad. Even sadder in the morning because none of them moved her body, just covered it. So Akin's first sight are the pale feet of his deceased sister. At 6 a.m., Baba wakes up, sees her dead body, and immediately goes to the bathroom, crying and wailing so hard that the neighbors come. He goes out to buy a coffin, and the funeral arrangements are sorted. Well, if you could call it a funeral, it was just Akin, Bolanle, and Iyatope just burying her in an unmarked grave. Although Shegi's death feels rushed, the end of this chapter has a scene with Baba and Akin that really made me teary-eyed. Regardless of everything Baba knows about his wife's deceptions, he still, in his own way, cradles Akin during this period of grief. He clearly still loves his children, even though they aren't exactly his. He's the only father they've ever known, which is probably why in chapter 27, Staying Power, when he calls a meeting 3 weeks later after Shegi's death, he calmly tells the wives that they can go. He's not going to stop them. They're shocked. Yeah, Tope's face is creased with tiredness. Yeah, Femi is terrified, but yeah, Shegi, this is why I say she's the smartest wife. Yeah, Shegi is cool as a cucumber. And she proceeds to deliver a monologue so convincing that even me, as I was reading it, I was like, Papa, forgive them. Papa, forgive and forget. The monologue truly rivals was that Bridgerton Princess Charlotte's I shall not go, I shall stay. I shall not go. Like that is that type of monologue. She really meant it when she said that she will follow her money anywhere and everywhere. I truly see why she is indeed the first wife. And so we get to the final chapter, chapter 28, Bolanle, where the Alao family has decided to keep their secrets from society and continue living together on Baba's terms. That's number one, Iyashegi should close all her shops and relinquish every kobo to him. Number two, Iyafemi is forbidden to wear makeup and to go to church. And Iyatope, actually, he gave no rules to Iyatope. And she's actually now the most favored more than the other wives. So all the wives agreed to the new rules, except Bolanle, who for days after Shegi's passing felt like she was having some sort of spiritual awakening. She's grateful for Baba and all the time she spent in his house, but ultimately decides to rejoin her life path. So despite knowing that she will face challenges, people calling her a gold digger, second-hand woman, blah, 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 she won't let any of that hold her back because in her words, I am back now and the world is spread before me like an egg cracked open. And that, my friends, is the story of The Secret Lives of Baba Shegi's Wives by Lola Shoneyin. But wait, we're not done yet because that was only the narration. Now let's take a look at our rule scale and give it a score made by yours truly to systematically rate the books based on four things: readability, entertainment slash enjoyment, writing style, and the lessons learned. Readability. I would give this book a solid 8 out of 10. It was a very intriguing read. I mean, it pulls you in the first few pages, like the first few chapters. You're already immersed in the story. And I feel like Lola Shoneyi's writing is really good at doing that, really good at immersing you and conveying the emotions of the characters really well to make you care about these characters and care about the story. Like, yeah, why should we care about the secret lives of Baba Shegi's wife? But she writes it in a way that actually makes you care. And by the end of the book, you're like, dang, wow, these secrets are crazy. Yeah, I would give it an 8. 8 isn't bad. So entertainment slash enjoyment, I was highly, highly entertained by this book. 9 out of 10. For entertainment alone, there were so many funny moments as well as emotional moments. I laughed, I cried, I cringed. I felt almost every emotion. So yeah, 9 out of 10. Writing style, I would give an 8 out of 10. Yes. Lola Shoneyin is such an accomplished author. The writing style is quite unique, and I like how we get every single person's POV. Although I would have liked either Shegi's POV or Akin's POV, since they are the two most prominent children in the book. But I understand why we didn't get any of the children's points of view. The book is about the wives, so we don't really need the children's points of view. It would have been nice to have it though, especially like after we learn about Shegi's death. Maybe we could have known more about how Akin was feeling and how he was relating with his siblings. But yeah, 8 out of 10. Really good. Lessons learned. So, what is the main lesson of this book? Don't marry more than one wife. No, I'm joking. No, but to be fair, I feel like the author, since she grew up in a polygamous household, I'm sure she saw some of these things firsthand. Obviously, not like poisoning another wife. Maybe, hopefully, they didn't poison anybody in her family. But you know what I mean? Like the dynamics in polygamous homes is very different from monogamous homes. So I feel like that's really what she was trying to convey, that it may look like sunshine and rainbows on the outside, but you never really know what secrets a family is hiding, you know. The main lesson of this story is actually marry one woman. I can't lie, it's marry one woman to avoid see finish. No, but I give it a solid 8 out of 10. Lola Shoneyin definitely wrote this book to show the cracks that lie behind polygamous households sometimes, and I believe her firsthand experience in such settings helped her reiterate those points, in this book. Overall, the main theme of this book is really just family. Like it's about family, it's about love, and I guess ultimately it is about sacrifice because each wife had to sacrifice something to be with Baba Shegi. And ultimately, Baba Shegi had to sacrifice his manhood, in a sense, to keep the secrets that none of his children are his. So he's keeping the secret not only from society, but also from his own children. So now it's a secret that the whole family keeps, which is crazy. But yeah, ultimately 8 out of 10. So that brings the score to 33 out of 40. That's 82.5%. A plus. That's not bad. I would give this book an A plus. This book is definitely an A plus, I would say. Thank you so much for watching. Again, thank you for taking time out of your day to watch this video. I really do appreciate it, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope I was a good narrator. I hope you felt immersed in the story, and I hope this video made you curious to go read the book yourselves. That's ultimately the goal of this channel, is to just get more people to read more books and become more literate. So yeah, thank you. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like, leave a comment, and make sure to subscribe for more videos. So thank you again. Good night. See you in the next video.